Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Radical Candor podcast. I am Kim Scott.
I'm Jason Rosoff.
And I'm Amy Sandler. And it is so important to know how to apologize. Today, we're going to explore some, quote, apologies that are not apologies at all. For example, I'm an asshole. I was just kidding. Kim, this has been really hard for me. Oh, I'm sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable. And adjacent to that, I am so sorry you feel that way.
That's my bugaboo, that one. I hate when people say that.
Kim, I was having a bad day. Let me explain. Forgive me. I don't think I did that justice, but we'll see.
You did very well.
Okay.
The forgive me, by the way, I was talking to somebody about this, and she said someone had touched her in a way that made her feel uncomfortable, and he blocked the door so she couldn't get out of the room where they were and said, "Forgive me." So there's an especially bad forgive me.
Oh my, yeah, we're just doing the words. We're not even getting into the
stories.
All the other stuff.
I couldn't, sorry.
So,
I couldn't resist.
luckily, Kim, you did a deep dive on this in Radical Respect. So go ahead, get Kim's new book, Radical Respect, wherever books are sold. But you are in luck because we're going to give you the shorthand by putting all of these false apologies into one scenario. So if you're listening to this while you're having a cocktail, a mocktail, go ahead, take a sip every time you hear a false apology. We thought we would kick this off with a little role play, and we've got two roles here. One is the sorry, not sorry person, who we're calling here as sorry, not sorry Sam. And we've got patient Pam in the other corner. So, Kim, Jason, are you feeling not sorry or patient or both?
I can be patient, Pam.
All right, I'm not sorry, Sam.
All right. Well, it looks like it's starting with not sorry, Sam. Take it away.
Hey, Pam, I wanted to talk to you about what happened in the meeting yesterday.
Hey, Sam. Sure. What's up?
Well, I just wanted to say I'm sorry. You know, I'm an asshole for calling you out like that in front of everyone when you were just trying to help.
Thanks for saying that, but it still really hurt my feelings.
Yeah, I get it. I was just kidding around, you know? I mean, I didn't mean for it to come off so harsh. I guess it's hard to take a joke.
It's hard when they're not funny. It didn't feel like you were kidding. It felt like a personal attack.
Look, I know, but this week has been really hard for me. I'm dealing with all the stress of this project, and I've been on edge. I was being funny, but I guess it just came out in the wrong way.
Yeah, and I understand you've been stressed, but that doesn't give you an excuse to treat me that way.
I'm sorry if I've made you feel uncomfortable. That was not my intention.
And I also appreciate that it wasn't your intention, but that's how it made me feel, and that's what matters.
Well, I'm really sorry you felt that way. Let me explain where I was coming from.
Sure, go for it.
I was having a bad day, and your suggestion overwhelmed me, so I acted like an infant. Like I said, I'm an asshole.
And again, I do understand that, but it's not okay for you to take out your bad day on me. That's not an effective way to deal with a tough situation.
You are 100% right. Can you forgive me?
I think I could, but I need some time to think about this. Honestly, the apology felt a bit insincere to me.
I'm just trying to move on.
And scene. Speaking of moving on, how do our Radical Candor family players feel about that exchange? Jason, I thought you were handling it. I think you were very patient as Pam.
I was trying to follow the stage direction.
You did great. I think Pam's patience might have, in real life, elapsed a few phrases before. But Kim, just because you spent so much time on this, like what is going on with, if you could just almost like a play-by-play, peel back the tape, we're kind of debriefing like a football coach, like what is wrong with each of these phrases that you use? We can start with the very first one, which is, I'm an asshole. Tell me about that one.
Yeah, I mean, when I say I'm an asshole, basically what I'm saying is this is who I am, deal with it. You know, I'm not going to change. Basically, I'm saying it's like saying tough shit, kind of, to me. Anyway, I don't know. What do you all think?
I was wondering if there's a material difference between saying I'm an asshole and I behaved poorly. I behaved like a jerk. I behaved like an asshole.
Yeah, that's very different. To say I'm an asshole just means, yes, I did that once and I'm going to do it again in the future. To me, anyway. Like, I behaved like a jerk is a very different thing to say. Like, I don't want to be a jerk. If you say I'm an asshole, to me, anyway, it's like, I'm an asshole and I'm proud of it. And I have no intention of behaving otherwise. But maybe I'm reading too much into
No, I think it aligns with the whole philosophy of radical candor of giving core feedback and focusing on the situation, on the behavior, on things that can change. And to your point, if you're self-defined as an asshole, then it's like, just deal with it. And it just gives you sort of a get out of jail free card for any other behavior because I can't change.
And I think what's interesting about that one to me is that my guess is that a lot of people in the heat of the moment might actually mean I behaved like an asshole, not I am sanguine with the fact that I am a jerk. And this is like an example of getting the words right to make it clear that you. Because I think, Kim, the criticism is that when you say it, it doesn't seem like you believe or care to change the behavior. And I think that's the risk. If you're making any kind of apology and the apology comes across is phrased in a way that makes it seem like you're sort of either okay with the behavior or you don't plan to change it, then you've not made a real apology.
Yeah, it's not an apology. I'll tell you the story. When I wrote that in Radical Respect, one of the things I said that's not an apology is saying I'm an asshole. And I didn't write the story that I was thinking of, but I'll tell it. You want to hear it or not?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so here's what happened. We were driving around and around. We were in DC, I think, and I'm with my family, and we were my parents and my siblings, not my husband and my children. And we're driving around and around and around. And finally, there was a parking spot. And there was somebody who had been waiting for it. And my father was driving. I said, "Dad, get it!" And he got it. So I was an asshole, first of all. And like he zipped in and
acted like.
Yes. I was acting like, but maybe I even was, because I thought it was hilarious, and then this is true confessions here. This is not my best moment. And then my father got out of the car, and the person who'd been waiting, started walking up to him. And my father looked at this guy and he was like, "Yeah, I know I'm an asshole." And he slammed the door and hit the lock and walked off. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, it was a moment where I was like, really, I have put my father in the role of being, I was the jerk. I don't think he would have done that if I hadn't egged him on. And second of all, his response to it, I could tell that what he said, enraged that person even more, which was his point. So anyway, that's why it's not an apology to say that's what was going on in my brain when I wrote that.
Yeah.
It's reminding me of the scene in Fried Green Tomatoes, if any of you know what I'm talking about, where the character played by Kathy Bates, has been waiting to get a parking spot and goes around and around, and then finally this little car speeds in, and Kathy Bates is filled with so much rage that she just smashes the car over and over and over again until she finally says something to the effect of, like, "Honey, I'm too old and I have too much car insurance. So here you go." I'm not doing it justice. We'll have to find that clip. But yes, parking can really inspire assholery, I guess, is maybe the flavor. Let's move on.
Or not. It can also spark the fundamental attribution error, like the which is sort of what you're doing when you say I'm an asshole. You're making the fundamental attribution error about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into some of the other examples and why they aren't apologies, right? So Kim, I think you were just kidding when you said you're an asshole. You were just kidding.
Yeah. The reason why that is not an apology is that the point is that it's a little bit like demanding that the other person have good intentions of you. Like maybe you were kidding, but that is irrelevant. The problem is that what I said hurt Pam, made it harder for Pam to do her work.
Mhm.
And so for me to say I was just kidding is I'm making it now about me. And what I should be doing is making it about acknowledging what I did wrong and making it right for Pam. And I think like in that whole role play, my whole goal was to make it right for me. I didn't really care about Pam.
Yeah. It's always true that comedy is measured at the receiver's ear, not the speaker's mouth.
Yeah.
So if you're saying, I was just joking, I was just kidding, I was just being funny, that's not a stake you get to claim. The other person has to also think it's funny.
Yes.
Kim, how often does power weigh in on this of sort of who gets to decide who's funny and what a joke is? So not only landing at the recipient's ear, but can't this person take a joke, etc.
Yeah, I mean, humor when it is so the evolutionary purpose of humor is to help us become more aware, to help us notice something that we otherwise wouldn't have noticed. That's at least that's according to Anne Liebert, who is a professor of comedy, who I met through Kelly at Second City.
Kelly Leonard, yeah.
Yes, Anne is his spouse. So anyway, it's ha ha aha. So the purpose is enlightenment of humor. And also another important thing to remember about humor is that it should never kick down. If you have power in the situation, you should never make fun of someone. If you have more power, you should never make fun of someone who has less power. But if you have less power, it's okay to make fun of someone who has more power. So that's one of it. It's usually it could be risky, maybe, but it doesn't carry the same wrong, I think.
I think it's interesting just to layer that into this conversation when you think about the workplace and how someone's role and power, either hierarchical or systemic, could play into this. But I got to say, Kim, this week has been so hard for me. I mean, oh my God, so stressful. Why is that a false apology? Just talking about how hard everything is.
Well, I mean, for me at least, I'd love to hear what others think. But to me, that's making it about me again. When I'm like, oh, this is so hard for me. It's like, I made a mistake. I hurt you. And now I'm asking you to feel sorry for me. And so it just seems not fair.
What do you think, Jason, Pam?
Well, this whole thing is, as we were going through it, I kind of think the role play follows the narcissist prayer. Are you all familiar with that?
No, what is that?
So
how have I gone this long without knowing this?
The narcissist prayer is, that didn't happen, and if it did, it wasn't that bad, and if it was, that's not a big deal, and if it is, that's not my fault, and if it was, I didn't mean it, and if I did, you deserved it.
Wow. I think we could just end right there.
That is incredible.
This is
so. Don't be a narcissist when you apologize. It's the TLDR.
Yeah, I think
that's a good tip.
The whole point of the prayer is to talk about the tactics that people who are trying to make something about themselves usually use to deflect or discredit someone. Because I think what Pam did really well in the script that you wrote, Brandy, is Pam stood their ground. Right? Pam, at no point did Pam say, I give up and it's okay and I'm going to let you get away with it. Even at the very end, I ad-libbed a little bit and I said, look, I think I might be able to forgive you, but I'm not ready to.
Yeah.
And that is the only way to have a chance of counteracting someone who's trying to make it all about themselves, is to not give the last sort of measure of your power in that situation, which is to acquiesce to the way that the picture that they're painting of the world.
I think that's so helpful. And as we in just a little bit, we'll get into some tips and what good looks like. I think that you, in terms of the standing up for yourself, and also at the end, like, give yourself some time. Like, I really appreciated the way you said that. Like, I need to figure out why this felt insincere. There was something else that was going on. And Kim, when you said, like, I'm sorry if I made you feel uncomfortable, I'm sorry you feel that way. Like, there's a lot about, again, intention versus impact. So tell us about ascribing sort of this, I'm sorry about you feel X, Y, and Z. What's going on there?
I mean, when somebody says to me, "I'm sorry you feel that way," what I hear is, "You're being oversensitive. You shouldn't feel that way, and it's not my fault." That's what I
Mhm.
hear. And I think that's the problem with, "I'm sorry you feel that way," doesn't acknowledge that you've done anything wrong. It's just like, it's
Mhm.
like saying, "Don't be so sensitive," as far as I'm concerned.
And I think this is another place where a slightly different word choice can have a very different
Mhm.
impact, which is, you could say, it makes me really sad that you feel that way. Like I am, it's not, I'm not apologizing because I don't necessarily know exactly what I did wrong, but it makes me sad to realize that I made you feel that way, or something like that. Is different than saying, I'm sorry you feel that way.
It's better. I mean, I think, though, you wanna try to go back before saying how you feel about their feelings, because, like, there you can get the feelings thing, you can get on this Tacoma State Bridge where I feel terrible, then you feel terrible, and now I can't pay attention to what I did wrong, like the resonant emotion. So I think better to say, "I wanna know what I did that made you feel sad, because I don't wanna do it again." Or something like that. I don't know, Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's
Amy?
fine. I guess what I was saying is, like, I do believe that is power. There's power in acknowledging your. I guess it depends on the situation. Again, if there's like a power differential, I probably would feel differently. But if this was a close relationship, I think there's power in acknowledging the difference between a defensive response, which is,
Yeah.
I'm annoyed you feel that way,
Yeah.
and another response, which is like, oh, it makes me, like, I'm acknowledging, I'm telling you through my own experience, through my own lens, like that, how that it made me feel badly to that I had this impact on you. And I think if it's not paired with, and here's what I intend to do to change in the future, then you still haven't apologized. Like, you still haven't acknowledged your behavior.
Yeah. I've thought about this in terms of white woman's tears, right? Like, I think the problem, if I say or do something that is, say, biased, and somebody points it out to me, and then I get upset, or I say I'm sad, or worse, I start to cry. Now again, I'm making it about me rather than, like, I don't want to. I was talking to Andy about this. We're taking a walk, and he was in a situation where he did something that he didn't, he didn't intend to do anything wrong, but he did something that upset someone else. And he said he tried really hard to respond in a way that showed that he cared, but that didn't put the other person in the role of comforting him.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was a good point. So, like, I think it's good to show that you care, and sometimes your emotions are how you show you care. But you want to make sure that your emotions then don't steal the show, that you are
I buy that.
remain focused on them.
And I think if it's easier to remember just not to do it, then that's better.
It's different things are easier for different folks.
And I think just acknowledging that if somebody says, this thing you said to me was biased, you're having an emotional reaction to that is valid. It's, what are you going to do to manage that reaction so that you can show up in a way that's still taking responsibility for it, whether you need to take some time, et cetera. Kim, is that
Yeah.
kind of what you're saying?
I think that's right. I thought a lot about this, about, how to become aware and make amends, what to do when you've upset someone or hurt someone, or harm someone in some kind of way. And as I was writing Radical Respect, I read this wonderful book on repentance and repair that goes into great detail about what to do. Because it's a terrible feeling that to realize that you've harmed someone else. I mean, I can tell you, when I realize I've hurt someone else, I feel like my stomach drops to my knees, and then the backs of my knees start to tingle. Like I'm terrified. And so what can you do in the moment to respond well? And Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg, who wrote on repentance and repair, went back to the 12th century to Maimonides and came up with some real wisdom. Like we've been hurting each other in this world for a long time, and there's some wisdom there. You want me to tell you what Maimonides would
Please.
say? All right.
Yeah, I've been waiting 1,000 years for this.
Okay, so there's 5 A's. First, be aware. And this is really important because very often, if someone tells you that you've hurt them, or at least if someone tells me that I've hurt them and I wasn't aware what I did wrong, my first kind of instinct is to say I wasn't aware, as though that absolves me of any further action. And that's a problem. So it's like my obligation to be aware. And when I was reading about this, and when I wrote "Be Aware is the first step," I was thinking of one of the most chilling incidents of my career. I was having dinner with an entrepreneur and his daughter. And his daughter was an adult. His daughter had worked for the firm. And his daughter was telling him that she had become so depressed at one point while working for him that she had become suicidal. And his response was, "I wasn't aware." And then he moved right on. As though that, like, it was his job as, as a leader, and even more his job as her father, to be aware of what was going on for her. So I think taking some personal accountability for our awareness of the impact that we have on others is step number 1. What do you think?
Well, the first thing that's popping up, that story is really powerful, is just the value of proactively asking for feedback, because we may not be aware. And the only way, if somebody isn't presenting that to us, is actually actively checking in with people, to see, hey, is there something I could do differently? Or is there something that I've said that's made you uncomfortable? Or is there, to me, it just goes back to the order of operations. Start by asking for feedback, because that person might not feel safe to share that unless you've sort of given them the opportunity to do so.
Yeah. And sometimes the person may feel it's not their job to educate you. At which point you need to educate yourself. And that may mean asking other people who are in the room, not the person you hurt, but other sort of upstanders for that person, or just observers of the situation. It may mean doing some research. So taking some accountability to be aware and to educate ourselves about the things we may not be aware of is step number 1. So that's number 1. That's the first of 5 A's. The next is to acknowledge your mistake as publicly as possible. I think it is so deeply ingrained in us to hide our mistakes. And acknowledging your mistake as publicly as possible does a bunch of things. One, it shows that you know what you did, and it helps other people avoid making the same mistake that you just made by acknowledging it publicly. And it also gets you out of the mindset of trying to cover up your mistake. So I think acknowledging your mistake as publicly as possible is really important. And this runs counter to what most PR firms will tell you. If you're a business leader, it runs counter. I remember one time I mean, this is different, but I backed into someone. I just said, this was totally my fault. And we, called the cops, and the cops came, and I said, this was my fault. And I got home and and I told Andy what had happened, and he was like, and then I told him what I had said. He's like, "You can't admit it's your fault." I'm like, "But it was my fault, and that was because of insurance." But in the end, like, we got to overcome these. There's all kinds of pressures in the world that would have us not acknowledge our mistakes as publicly as possible and push back against those pressures and acknowledge the mistake.
I think that's so important, especially when you think about leaders showing vulnerability and, don't admit mistakes, and what we see modeled sometimes in the political arena and other spaces. So I think you mentioning that. Do you have an example, Kim or Jason, where either you or leaders in organizations you've been a part of have done this really well, either in like a team meeting or some other way?
I mean, that's kind of what's behind Whoops-a-Daisy, is where I, as the leader of the team, stood up and acknowledged some mistake I had made that week. And it was part of every week we did that.
And it was a stuffed animal for folks who aren't aware of.
Well, it was a stuffed flower, a daisy.
Okay.
Or it
Gotcha.
should have been, yes. There's a longer story there, but let's just suffice it to say it should have been a stuffed flower.
Gotcha. Jason,
Whoops-a-daisy.
anything on acknowledging mistakes publicly?
I think a word of caution, so that people don't think this is like a recipe that you follow and you like become aware and then you publicly acknowledge your mistake, for the simple reason of, if you have not gone through the other steps and the person, like, you have to be very careful about the story that you tell, because the other person may not feel like you have acknowledged to them the mistake that you've made and you've tried to like work towards making amends. And so by making it public, it can like reignite the pain of the thing, because you actually haven't fixed the problem. And so that was the only thing I was going through my mind, is like, I feel like I'd want to make sure that I made it right with the person or people who were most directly affected by the mistake that I made before I announced it publicly.
Yeah, you don't want to write a whole novel about what you did and not tell the person.
I think it seems obvious, but this is the kind of thing where
you're right.
I feel like it's good to be specific, which is, you want to make sure that your acknowledgement is not going to come as a surprise to the person that you harmed.
Yeah, and re-harm them. Yeah. Really important. Really important.
So Kim, do you want to walk us through the other parts of these A's and maybe even the order that Jason is referring to, how people might want to think about it?
So you want to be aware, you want to acknowledge your mistake as publicly as possible. Again, this was probably meant to happen in a temple in the 13th century, not on social media. So be aware, acknowledge. Third is accept the consequences. Like, don't try to, this is part of the problem with all these like investigations that really are just an effort to avoid a lawsuit. So you want to accept the consequences, make amends. So to make amends, you might have to go beyond the consequences. You might have to offer the person more than you would be required to accept the consequences. And only after you've done those things does Maimonides say it's time to apologize. But apology is not the end. You have to change for good. You can't keep making the same mistake and then apologize. Like, I'm sure there are people in everyone's life who are always late and they're so apologetic about being late. I'm like, let's just accept that you're going to be late, and I'm okay with it and you're okay with it. What I'm not okay with is this apology that you're late,
What's coming up as you're going through all this is that apologizing and apologies is not a one-off event. It's an ongoing relationship building modeled by not just the words you're using, but also the way in which you're putting it into practice, much like radical candor, right? Like, if you say you're going to do this thing and you don't do it, then that's not really, that's still the false apology, because you didn't, sort of put your actions where your words were.
Yeah. And I want to acknowledge that often the change is hard. And it's going to take time. And you have to extend yourself some grace if you want others to extend some grace. So there was a CEO who I worked with who was trying to change his vocabulary. Instead of standing up in front of the whole company and saying, "You guys," he was trying to stand up and say, "Folks," because half the people, well, a third of the people anyway in the room were not guys. And this was hard. It wasn't like the worst harm he had ever created, but he was really trying to do it. And it was very hard. It's hard to change habits of speech that we've had since we were very young. And so, we all extended him some grace, and I think he got like those little rockets or something that, styrofoam rockets people could shoot at him when he did it. There was some sort of accountability. But so I don't want this to be so heavy. It could be,
and hopefully
fun.
those were very light rockets.
Yeah.
I know the ones you're talking
they're
about.
on a rubber band. And,
yeah.
I love those things.
Kim, to that point, in terms of change is hard, like I would love to get an example for folks. Is there an apology that you have used recently or an act of apologizing that you want to share that could be helpful, that kind of reinforces these A's and then the C for change?
Yes. I mean, one of the most poignant examples of an excellent apology is a story that can I read this from Radical Respect? It's a story from This American Life. So the ACK principles are featured in an apology to Lindy West, who was targeted by a troll after her father died. The troll opened a Twitter and Gmail account in Lindy's deceased father's name and started sending her cruel messages. Rather than ignoring the troll, West wrote about the experience on the website Jezebel and got this response from him. Hey, Lindy, I don't know why or even when I started trolling you. It wasn't because of your stance on rape jokes. I don't find them funny either. I think my anger towards you stems from your happiness with your own being. It offended me because it served to highlight my unhappiness with my own self. I have emailed you through 2 other Gmail accounts just to send you idiotic insults. I apologize for that. I created the Paul West Donizo at gmail.com account and the Twitter account. I have deleted both. I can't say sorry enough. It was the lowest thing I have ever done. When you included it in your latest Jezebel article, it finally hit me. There's a living, breathing human being who is reading this shit. I am attacking someone who never harmed me in any way and for no reason whatsoever. I'm done being a troll. Again, I apologize. I made a donation in memory to your dad. I wish you the best. So that is an apology. It's more than an apology because he did all the things. He was aware of what he did wrong. He acknowledged his mistake as publicly as possible. He accepted the consequences. He made amends. He apologized and he changed.
I can't add anything more to that. That was really powerful.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to read it. It almost brings tears to your eyes.
It is.
Everybody says ignore the trolls and, she didn't.
And honestly, I think she saw the humanity in that person. And I think that action as reflected is, the sort of idea that hurt people.
Yeah.
So I think that it gave that person a chance to access their own humanity. So, all right. Well, with that, let's get into our checklist so that we can start putting more. What is the respectful apologies, Kim?
Yes.
What would your respectful apologies into practice?
Or don't race to apology, I would say. So it's a respectful apology, but it's also don't apologize prematurely. Don't apologize before you know what you did wrong.
It's almost like a thoughtful apology process.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
So tip number 1, to sincerely apologize, to have a more thoughtful apology process to this person to whom you've caused harm. Practice your ACK skills. We're calling it ACK?
Yes.
ACK?
5 A's and a C.
5 A's and a C. Be aware. Acknowledge what you did wrong. Make amends. Accept the consequences. Apologize and change.
Tip number 2, don't use emotion to avoid accountability. If you're prone to tears, make sure you and others who are present remain focused on the person harmed. Don't allow the discomfort that others feel in the face of your tears to cause them to give you a pass when you're acknowledging what you did wrong. Don't let it become about you.
Tip number 3, when you've hurt someone, rather than focusing on your intentions, take a moment to look for the actual harm your attitude or behavior may have done. If someone is upset, try to understand why rather than to reject the other person's emotions. Remember, an apology is not a substitute for fixing the problem. Apologies repeated over and over without action become an irritation, like throwing salt in the wound.
For more tips, to see the show notes for this episode, go over to radicalcandor.com/podcast. Praise in public, criticize in private. And if you like what you hear, please do rate and review us wherever you're listening. If you've got criticism for us, email it, podcast@radicalcandor.com. We love to hear it. We read every one. Finally, don't forget to order Radical Respect. It's available everywhere books are sold. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.
Take care.
The Radical Candor podcast is based on the book Radical Candor, Be a Kick-Ass Boss Without Losing Your Humanity by Kim Scott. Episodes are written and produced by Brandy Neal with script editing by me, Amy Sandler. The show features Radical Candor co-founders Kim Scott and Jason Rosoff and is hosted by me, still Amy Sandler. Nick Carissimi is our audio engineer. The Radical Candor podcast theme music was composed by Cliff Goldmacher. Follow us on LinkedIn, Radical Candor the company, and visit us at radicalcandor.com.